Welcome to Timeless Photos. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss more videos like this one.
Times Square, 1921. Let's look at Times Square in 1921. Many people don't know that Times Square isn't really a square. It's where Broadway meets 7th Avenue, from 42nd to 45th Street. This photo shows the famous bright lights that have lit up the city since the first electric ad in 1904. It was first called Longacre Square but was renamed after the New York Times building. People have gathered here for years, with the first New Year's Eve ball drop happening back in 1907. Russian families during the Russian famine. From 1914 to 1920, Russia went through two terrible wars, World War I and then the Russian Civil Wars after the Revolution. Money troubles and a bad drought in early 1921 caused a huge famine, mostly in the areas around the Volga and Ural rivers shown here. About 5 million people died. Many were saved by the American Relief Administration, which Herbert Hoover set up to help feed hungry people across Europe after World War I. Ku Klux Klan meeting, Georgia. Stone Mountain in northern Georgia has a mixed history. It's a beautiful rock formation, but also where the second version of the Ku Klux Klan held its first meeting in 1915. The Klan grew bigger in the early 1920s, but started to lose members after the Indiana KKK leader was found guilty of murder. Today, people argue about whether to remove the Confederate memorial there, as many think it celebrates racism. Hudson Factory production line. Here we see the Hudson Motor Car Company factory in Detroit. From 1909 to 1954, they produced cars before merging to form the American Motors Corporation. Their signature engine was the Super 6, more powerful than typical four-cylinder engines of the time. Although Hudson became America's third most successful car manufacturer, they never reached Ford or Chevrolet's production levels. Their peak year was 1929 with 300,000 cars, while Ford sold 1.5 million that same year. First Miss America. Did you know the Miss America pageant started to extend Atlantic City's tourist season? In this photo, we see Margaret Gorman, who won the first ever Golden Mermaid crown and $100 prize when she was just 16 years old. After 15-year-old Marion Bergeron won in 1933, organizers raised the age range to 18 to 26. By 1944, the previous year's winner suggested turning the prize into a college scholarship, changing the nature of the competition. R-38. Airship crash. Airships have a brief and often tragic history. The R-38 class airship shown here was designed during World War I for the British Royal Navy, but was abandoned after the armistice. The United States Navy later purchased it for testing. At the time, it was the largest airship ever built. Tragically, on its fourth test flight, the R-38 suffered structural failure, exploding mid-air and crashing into England's Humber estuary. The disaster killed 16 of 17 Americans and 28 of 32 Britons on board. The Tulsa Race Massacre. This photo shows the aftermath of possibly the worst incident of racial violence in American history. In 1921, Tulsa's Greenwood district was home to America's wealthiest black community, known as Black Wall Street. The violence began after armed groups gathered at the courthouse where a black teenager was held on false assault charges. Though he was later freed, rumors spread, and over 18 hours, white mobs destroyed 35 blocks, murdered between 100 to 300 black residents, and burned homes, businesses, churches, schools, and hospitals. Burning of the Dublin Custom House. During the Irish War of Independence from 1919 to 1921, the Irish Republican Army fought British forces in a guerrilla campaign for independence. This moment came in May 1921, when the IRA occupied and burned Dublin's Custom House, almost completely destroying this important government building. The conflict led to the Anglo-Irish Treaty, making Ireland a dominion of the British Empire, though fighting continued until Ireland was officially declared a republic in 1949. British women allowed to join police forces. World War I created an opportunity for women in law enforcement as many young men went to war. By 1921, British women could serve as police officers, though they lacked the power of arrest until 1932, when Dorothy Peto became the first woman granted this authority. Early female officers primarily focused on helping young girls and women, issuing warnings to keep them off the streets. The role was limited but represented an important first step toward equality in policing, making the top-grossing film of 1921. Here we see the making of The Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, 1921's highest-grossing film. Director Rex Ingram appears in full Hollywood regalia with boots and a top hat. The script was written by June Mathis, one of the most powerful women in early Hollywood and the first female executive at MGM. She also discovered Rudolph Valentino, who became a massive star after this film. The Four Horsemen is now considered a classic and one of the first true anti-war films. Early radio. Radio broadcasting took off in the early 1920s, following technological advances made during World War I. Weekly music broadcasts began in 1919, and by 1922, over 500 stations across America offered daily programming. Young people were encouraged to build their own crystal radio receivers with headphones to tune into this exciting new medium. This photo shows the early equipment that brought entertainment and news into homes across the country. E.J. Hooper's basketball team. Oliver High School in Winchester, Kentucky was a segregated school for black children that operated from 1892 to 1956. In this photo, we see Coach Ernest J. Hooper with his basketball team. Hooper developed championship sports programs at the school, and his efforts paid off. Both the football and basketball teams went on to become Bluegrass League champions in 1923, creating opportunities and pride within their community. Pouring illegal alcohol into the New York sewer. Prohibition in America lasted from 1920 to 1933, banning the production, import, transport, and sale of alcoholic beverages. This led to a massive increase in bootlegging as criminal gangs ran illegal operations. Here we see New York Deputy Police Commissioner John A. Leach supervising the disposal of alcohol seized during a 1921 raid. Despite enforcement efforts like this one, Prohibition ultimately failed to stop Americans from drinking and created more problems than it solved. Cairo Conference. After Britain occupied Mesopotamia during World War I, a popular uprising in 1920 led to the Cairo Conference to discuss the region's future. This photo shows notable British figures including Gertrude Bell, T.E. Lawrence, known as Lawrence of Arabia, and Winston Churchill. This meeting would shape the modern Middle East for generations to come. Prince Hirohito visits London. Prince Hirohito's 1921 European tour marked the first time a Japanese crown prince had traveled abroad. During his London visit, he apparently appreciated the relative casualness of British court life, compared to the rigid formality he was accustomed to in Japan. The future emperor enjoyed playing golf with Prince Edward and having breakfast with King George V, building international relationships that would later be tested during World War II. The birth of Aston Martin. In 1914, Lionel Martin and Robert Bamford registered a self-built car in the Aston Clinton hill climb race in Buckinghamshire. Their success led them to form a car company named after this event, Aston Martin. The company would later become world famous for its luxury sports cars and connection to James Bond films. But this photo shows its humble beginnings. The Flatiron Building. Built in 1902, the triangular Flatiron Building stands where Fifth Avenue, Broadway, and East 22nd Street meet in New York City. Its name comes from its resemblance to a cast-iron clothes iron. This photo shows the iconic structure in 1921. Bombing of the USS Alabama. The USS Alabama joined the United States Navy in 1900 and spent her early years in peacetime training. During World War I, she served as a training ship. After the war, as shown in this photo, she was used as a target for aerial bomb testing to evaluate the effectiveness of naval aviation. The USS Alabama was sunk by bombs in September 1921, helping military planners understand the growing importance of air power in naval warfare. Jack Johnson, the Galveston Giant. Jack Johnson was one of the most successful boxers of the 20th century and the first black American to become a world heavyweight champion. In this photo, he's using his tremendous strength for some winter chores. Johnson was a prominent figure in Harlem, influencing the Harlem Renaissance cultural movement. Checking for length. Would you believe that in 1921, Chicago police measured women's bathing suits to enforce cloth-length laws? As we can see in this photo, Swimsuits couldn't be more than 6 inches above the knee. Interestingly, these rules only applied to women. Men could wear trunks cut high on the thigh without any issue. This inequity continued until the bikini was invented in 1946 by French engineer Louis Reard, though the revealing style didn't become widely accepted until the 1960s.